So, welcome everybody. This is Getting the Play You Want, Six Styles of Negotiation. I am Dawn or Belet Dawn and have been presenting since 2004. Now, I know at least one person on here has heard my intro many, many times, so I will try to keep it short. I've been doing Zoom since COVID started, and before that, presenting since, like I said, 2004. I've been in a power exchange relationship with Daniel Bellum since 2001. We are coming up on our 23rd anniversary, which is just crazy. And then we have some books out. We have Hearts and Collars. We have the Polyamory Toolkit. We created the Kickstarter cards. We've run events. We have the podcast Erotic Awakening and have been doing that for almost 15 years. So everything we do can be found at eroticawakening.com. You can also go there and get on the newsletter to find out what classes are coming up. I try to do 3 to 4 every month at this point, and you can become a patron there or join our Discord. Lots of options. So, we are going to talk about different styles of negotiation. We're going to talk about the stuff that you should always cover, and then a couple of different styles of negotiation. Because I know even after this many years, I have a hard time sometimes with negotiating. And you would think I'd be a pro at it at this point, but being the introvert that I am, not always knowing what I want or what the other person is interested in, negotiations can get kind of hard to do. So we're going to talk about a couple of styles. What we won't cover is how to find people to play with. So that is on you. You get to figure out how to find the people. I'll give you some tools on what to do once you find them and decide that you want to play with them. So a couple of disclaimers in that we teach from experience, not theory. So we're storytellers and we're using our experience to pass on and share with you guys so that you can take what you like and use it as you want to. There can be naughty language. I like to give that disclaimer. It catches people by surprise sometimes. I am not a soccer mom. I do have a foul mouth. So if we're talking about sex, there is going to be dirty language, just the way it is. So a little bit of terminology. I will be talking about scenes and BDSM scenes, which those involve a top, a bottom, maybe a toy, maybe more than a top and bottom, maybe even some switching. Usually it's a time limit. The stuff that I'm talking about is negotiating for a scene, negotiating for a set amount of playtime. Okay. A top, in case you're starting out at basic 101, a top is the person with the toy doing the thing. A bottom is the person having things done to them. A switch, because I just said that, a switch is someone that can flip from one to the other. You get to negotiate if that's done during scene or if each person is going to have a specific role during that scene. Now, sometimes you'll hear the words dom sub used. That can be a little confusing because some people use dom sub to mean a role in a relationship. Some people use dom sub as the roles in a play scene. So if you're talking with that language, make sure you're clear which roles you're talking about. So we're going to talk pre-negotiation. Before you even start negotiating, you should have some personal baselines. You should know a little bit about yourself. Even if you've never played before, you still know a little bit about yourself. Bring that in, bring that personal baseline with you to negotiation. These are things like, for me, I say this a lot when I teach, for me, right? It may not be for you, but for me, there are words that I don't like people to use about me or to me. And I've learned this over time. So this is one of my baseline negotiation items that I will bring to negotiation. I will make sure to mention, don't use this word, don't use that word. I hate giving limits like that, and we'll talk about that with some of the styles. But at this point of my journey, if those, and they're for me, they're degrading, and they'll put me into a bad headspace. So I know it makes me feel degraded. So I mention those and I'm like, don't say this and don't say that. Otherwise, we should be good. So, and that way, I mean, a top wants to know most of the time what to work with. There are many times that people will say, oh, just do anything. They don't really mean that. And as a bottom, if you're saying just do anything, then you're making a lot of work for the top. Now they've got to guess, and you've given them no limits and things like that. So try to have a few things that you bring to negotiation. The few that I have told about these words to have actually thanked me later because they knew what limit to stay in to make it a, I was going to say the word pleasant, to make it a pleasant experience. Sometimes my scenes aren't pleasant, but they're always good if I've negotiated them right. Okay, make sure you know what your hard limits are when you go into play with someone. You're probably not going to know what they all are right away, but sometimes something's going to happen where you're like, "Oh, no, we're not having that again. That's now a hard limit." Or some people use the word soft limits for things that they may negotiate later. Hard limits, not negotiable, don't even joke about. If I tell someone that something is a hard limit as a top, don't even joke to me that you are going to push my limit and we're going to push that one because I'll cut the scene off. So to me, hard limits are hard limits, not even jokeable. One of the ones that I'll share with that one is one of my hard limits is face slapping. Now, it's weird because it's a hard limit with everyone but Dan. So you can have hard limits that don't necessarily include your primary partner or one of your partners. Face slapping for me, it makes my ears ring and I have a partial in my face. So if you slap me, we have a chance of breaking stuff in my mouth that I don't feel like paying for to fix later. So, I don't have to have like an emotional reason for this. It's a physical reason. I just don't want it done. I mean, have you ever had like your shoulder slapped? It makes my ears ring. I mean, I lose my hearing with that. It's very unpleasant. So that is one of mine. I do not allow face slapping, and I bring that up in negotiation. So again, one of my personal baselines. What about allergies? This is something that's non-negotiable. If you have an allergy, you need to know this and you need to bring it up. It could be a latex allergy, it could be even gluten. I bring up that I have a gluten allergy so that they're not trying to feed me crackers or something for aftercare after a scene. There's other allergies that could come into play. So just make sure you know what they are and mention them if you think it's something that needs to be mentioned. Physical limitations. Again, you need to cover these. If you're a diabetic, you want to bring that up, whether you are a top or a bottom. If I play with the top, and I do play with the top that's a diabetic, he tells me what needs to be done, what to look out for, and what needs to be done if he's going into, a sugar crash or something. Scar tissue. I have a scar that goes all the way around my hips, and I'm numb this wide all the way around the scar. So what I would do is I will tell my top about the scar and not to hit me in that zone because if anything goes wrong, I won't feel it and I won't be able to safe word. So I will usually wear a pair of panties that they fit, they're like a little pair of boy shorts that fit right over that scar and they know not to strike me in that area. I've also used a marker. If they want me to be naked, I'll just use a marker and scribble on it. I've done that with my elbow before too. I had a bad elbow and I would remind Dan, hey, right arm, don't forget that. And then you're in a dungeon and you're like right arm, left arm, shit, I don't remember. So big marker, electric tape, duct tape. I've used it all to mark what not to hit or work with. Maybe you have some jewelry that needs to be brought up in negotiation. I don't take off my collar for anybody. So, I will actually mention to them that stays on. Maybe you have rings or bracelets or anklets or, whatever that you just need to mention. Sometimes they're not removable. So if you're doing rope with someone, but you have I'm going to call it a cable tie, but I'm not sure what the real word for it is. So like Bat, she had a non-removable cable around her ankle. If you're doing rope with someone, they need to know if you have something like that because that's going to affect how they tie you. So just some baseline things, like I said, to know about yourself. And and you're always going to be learning about yourself. So continue to add to them. My hard limits, I kept thinking, oh, I don't have a lot of hard limits years ago. And then, I mean, I had like the basic three. And then we went to go eat at like Outback Steakhouse or something like that. And I'm looking at all the stuff on the walls, and I'm like, "Oh, I've got some more to add. No guns, no bull whips, no," and I just started going down the wall. Oh, hey, I didn't even think about these as limits, but they could absolutely come into play. So that is one of my hard limits is no guns. And you would think that's obvious, but I've seen some interrogation play classes where that is part of the class, and I've had to leave because that is a limit of mine in play or just being around. But yay, PTSD, something else I'd bring up too. If I was going to do an interrogation scene with someone or something that wasn't something, this is hard to describe. I don't usually bring up my hard limit of guns unless it's going to be a scene that seems like that could be involved. Right? So when I'm going through my hard limits, I bring up the things that seem relevant. If I'm getting a spanking and all I'm getting is a spanking, there's a lot of things I won't bring up. I will bring up sex, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So, whether I'm having it or not. Anyway, create your own personal baseline negotiations. All right. Now, some negotiation basics. So you've got your baseline that is about you personally that you're going in with, right? And now you've got negotiation basics that pretty much everybody should be covering if they're playing with someone for the first time. Now, I've got a few play partners that I've played with more than a few times. We don't cover these during negotiation anymore unless something has changed. We do check in and don't take this as the way you should do it because there are a lot of people that will renegotiate with every scene regardless of how many times they've played. And that is absolutely fantastic. I'm just saying in my personal experience with the few people that I do play with, when we negotiate, if I go to Kinky College right now and I play with the person I play with there, we'll probably be walking next to each other to the dungeon saying, "Hey, what you got in mind?" "Well, I was thinking about this." "Okay, are we still the same limits as last time?" "Yep, same limits as last time." And then we'll go into play. If things have changed or if I want to try a different type of scene, I'll go, "So let's have a chat before we go to the dungeon." And if we've negotiated Friday night to play Saturday night, we will check in again with each other Saturday before getting to the dungeon in case things have changed. Okay, so that can be a great idea as well. So negotiation basics for all. The first one I usually cover is, and this is just so that I don't forget, is safe words. There's no real chronological order to this. But most events, if you go to events, will have an event safe word, and that's usually yellow and red. Yellow is slow down, red is stop. If you say red in a public dungeon, that top better stop, or DMs, dungeon monitors, are going to jump in. So know what your safe words are for the event you're at and what they will do if they're used. For me, I use yellow, and like I said, talk about this during negotiation. It can mean different things to different people or have slight nuances. So for me, when I play, if I use yellow, it means stop what you're doing, check in with me, see if it's just something feels funky, or I'm hurting someplace, or something's going to sleep, or I need a breath, or whatever. It could just be stop hitting the same spot, asshole. Move to the other cheek. That could be what yellow means. If I say red, red means stop the scene. Something's wrong. I ain't feeling it, whatever. So red is stop. Make sure you cover these. I also make sure to tell them that I am very good at using my safe words. I have used them for years. I will use them if I need to use them. So, with that being said, if I cry, that's not a safe word. If I cry, I'm in a very good place. You can stop if you want to. If it makes the top feel uncomfortable, obviously they can stop, but I'm not using that as a safe word. I will red if I need to red or yellow. So get very comfortable with using safe words because my play partners know that I will use a safe word. That means they can really play around with our scene. And as long as it's within the limits we've discussed, they can try new things because they know I'll stop them if I don't like it. Now, it's funny because one of my happy places is subspace. And if I can get to subspace, amazing. But I've used my safe words for so long, or yeah, I've been doing this for so long that even in subspace, I can come out of it enough to use a safe word if I have to. If you go nonverbal when you're in subspace, you need to know that as well because you'll need a different type of safe word, whether it's dropping a ball, squeezing fingers. Sometimes people will check in with me and they'll put their fingers in my hand and say, squeeze if you're okay. And as long as I squeeze back, I'm okay. So there's different things you can do with that. Make sure you talk about it during negotiation. The other thing to keep in mind is your current physical limitations. So again, I covered diabetes and scar tissue, things like that. If my wrists are hurting, I will let them know. When I negotiate right now, damn, the last one I negotiated, thank goodness the guy I'm playing with is a little bit older than me because he gets it. When I'm like, so furniture wise, I can't do a cross right now because my knee is hurting, my hip is hurting. If my hands are above my head for too long, I actually get lightheaded. So we're going to end up having to move around a lot if my hands are above my head. So how about we just do a spanking bench or a table if it's my lower back or whatever. But at this point of my life, it's usually a spanking bench if we can find one. So I think about the furniture. He will have me test it out to make sure there's enough padding for my knees. I like to have a blanket over it so that I have something to grab onto, things like that. I've learned these things about myself. I will also ask the top or suggest to the top that if they have physical limitations, right, to think about that as well. Dan had a bad wrist for a long time, so he couldn't do a lot of spanking. He couldn't do a lot of flogging with it. So he would make sure to mention that even if the person was a spanko, that he wasn't not spanking them because he didn't want to. It was because of a physical limitation. So as a top, make sure you're asking for information. As a bottom, make sure you're offering information. As in, Dan went to play with someone one time, this was a few years back, and he was asking about medical. And he's like, so anything I should know about, anything we should be concerned about? And she's like, no, no, everything's great. And then she went to go take off her shirt and she had the scar right here and it was like angry red. And Dan's like, "What is that?" And she's like, "Oh, I had open heart surgery." Like, I don't know if it was a few weeks or a month ago or whatever, but don't worry about it. I'm a nurse. It'll be okay. And Dan's like, "What the hell do you mean it'll be okay? If something happens to you and you're the nurse, that no." So they came up with something else. They still played, but it became more sensation. They modified. It became more sensation than it was impact. But as the bottom, she should have offered that information because he still gets to say no. As the top, he can still go, "Ooh, that's a little bit out of my comfort zone. Let's give it some more time to heal and then we'll play later," or whatever. And I'm assuming she didn't bring it up because she wanted to play with him and didn't want him to say no. And that's to me that's not consensual because he didn't have all the information. Anyway, tops ask, bottoms offer. Obviously both can ask and both can offer, but I like to throw that out there. Emotional limitations. I will only play with certain people if I am feeling emotionally thin. That means that my emotions are very close to the surface and they could be things that are triggering. It doesn't mean I won't play. I won't play with someone I haven't played with before, but I will play with others that I've played with before. I just warn them that I am very emotional. I'm feeling very thin. And again, it gives them the option. They may not want to play on that level. They may want a happy, giggly scene, and that's not the headspace I'm in. I talk about that. I'm very honest and very upfront with how I'm feeling emotionally because if we do hit a trigger, if we do hit a landmine, then we have to deal with that. And I don't want tops to be scared of a landmine with me, but I do want them to be warned if I know it's a possibility. I don't always know, but if I do, I'll throw that out there. What I do like to suggest with landmines is if they do happen, don't freak out. The bottom, the top, both of you, we are doing stuff that hits some chemicals, can hit some memories, can hit whatever, and landmines can happen. Just stop the scene or slow down the scene. I don't always like the scene stopped because that makes me feel broken, but slow down and start backing off the scene if that's possible, and then deal with it and talk and do the aftercare. So try not to freak out. They happen. One of the other things that you want to negotiate in all scenes is sex. There are some people out there that assume sex is part of BDSM. There are others that assume sex is not part of BDSM. You've got local and regional laws that will tell you if sex is allowed with BDSM at an event or a play space. So don't assume anything with this. And don't assume what sex means to someone, right? I have told someone before no sex. And then they were going for the nether regions. And I was like, "Hey, ho, ho, what are you doing?" They're like, "This isn't sex." I'm like, yes, in my book it is. So my bad. I should have been very clear with what I meant by no sex. Now I'm also going to throw in there kissing. Do you guys negotiate kissing? You should. So I actually took one of our kink starter cards, and I'm going to show you the kink starter cards. I actually took one of the blank ones and wrote kissing on it because that's a big one for me. Sometimes I'm in the mood to kiss, and sometimes I'm not. Someone I played with in Columbus, we were negotiating, and we were starting to negotiate in a little sexual stuff, right? We hadn't done that before. And I was like, "So, I had this desire to kiss him." And I was like, "So what about kissing?" And he's like, "Nope, off the table. I'm in a monogamous relationship. I can have sex during scenes, but I can't kiss because that's emotional." And I'm like, "Damn it." Right. I'm glad I brought it up because if sex was on the table and we had negotiated that into the scene, I would have automatically thought that kissing was allowed. So, I talk about that now. I have someone else that I play with. and I keep saying someone else. I've got 3 play partners in different cities. It's not like there's 20 or something. But there's one that I play with that he keeps asking me if I want to add kissing in. And I'm like, I'm just into impact. That's all I want to do with that person is impact. I don't want sex. I don't want fondling. I don't want anything sexual with it. I don't want kissing. He can pull my hair, and we've talked about that. But otherwise, all I want is a spanking and a caning. And he gets to say yes or no to that. If he wants more and he starts to become dissatisfied with the limits that I put on things, then he can he can say no and move on. And then I have to work at not taking that personally. But I'm also not going to change my mind just so that I keep a play partner. Again, I've got my personal baseline of what I'm willing to do. And sometimes that changes with each person. All right. Now, so we're talking about, is sex part of it? What is sex? Is it just penetration? Is it a blow job? I had someone ask me one time, what would I think if he asked for a blowjob during aftercare? And I'm like, um, if we did not negotiate sex, then don't ask for it during aftercare, right? You don't get to ask for things later. So that's not cool. When you're negotiating about sex, you also have to negotiate. Is it genitals? Is it toys if you're negotiating in sex? Is it fingers? Is it oral? Is it, you're really going to have to get nitpicky with the sex thing, because not getting nitpicky is how I was getting ready to quote consent violations, but consent violations happen. We're not gonna give it air quotes. They do happen. Make sure you talk about all the little bits and pieces when it comes to sex so that assumptions are not being made. If you are negotiating a sensual scene, ooh, there you are between BDSM and sex. What the hell does sensual mean? Get some details. What does that mean to each of you? Is the difference between sensual and sexual clear? If yes, you're having sex, make sure you're discussing safer sex. What what are you going to have? What barriers are you going to have for this? I I negotiated a scene with someone that was going to involve sex, and I told them barriers for everything. And what that means to some people and what it means to other people is very different. So I was in the swing community for this one, and it is very rare that I find a person in the swing community that uses barriers for oral sex. So make sure you are covering what everything means if that's the word that you use. I also negotiate if I can bring in the woo. I like to do sacred touch. I like to do energy play. I like to do all that intimate woo stuff. And I bring it up because sometimes that's too intimate for people and not something they want to play with. Another thing to bring up is aftercare. Are you getting aftercare as a bottom? Are you asking for aftercare? Are you going to your primary partner for aftercare? I'm making assumptions here that we're playing with someone new. What is required? Dan has played with people before that wanted aftercare from him. He's played with people before that wanted aftercare from their best friend or their partner, and some that didn't want aftercare at all because they don't get into subspace. They are rack 'em, smack 'em. Once they're done with him, they'll move on to the next person on their dance card and have a scene with them, and then they'll move on to the next person on their dance card, and they don't require aftercare. So get to know yourself. Do you require aftercare? And if so, what do you need? One of those things. Sometimes I require aftercare, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I want a snuggle with that person and a drink of water. Other times I want my hooded aftercare blanket so I can flip it over my head and hide in a corner. Depends on the type of scene. And then consent, another thing to keep in mind, right? I like to throw this in here because of the simple statement of consent can be withdrawn at any time. Just because you're negotiating all of this You can get into a scene and stop things. You can pull away that consent at any time. Okay. By either person. Dan has red lighted on me before because the music changed and it was stuff that he couldn't play to. And he's like, so we're done. I'm reading. The scene is done. Let's do some aftercare and go to bed. So, he can stop it too. Don't, okay, so here's the big one, and then I promise you we're going to go into the different styles. This is the one that I really try to make sure to, when we talk about consent, negotiation, I like to mention this one. You can withdraw consent at any time, is number one. Number two is please don't negotiate mid-scene. If you have already negotiated, don't change things in the middle of the scene because now you're negotiating impaired. Once those chemicals start flowing, you are more than likely become willing to agree to almost anything because the good vibes are going and things like that. So really look out for yourself. Tops, don't ask for things that you were told no during negotiation. That's a consent violation. Bottoms, don't let them change things up on you. All right. I'm also going to flip that story, as in, we were at an event many years ago in Atlanta and we were doing our sensual spanking class. And there was someone in the class that wanted to experience a sensual spanking. She got permission from her owner, came and talked to me and Dan. There really wasn't play space that was open during the time she was available. So we were going to go back to our hotel room. We don't, many people do not do this. I don't recommend this, but this is what we did at the time. We took all the precautions that we could think of. We told her owner that he could come and watch if he wanted to. He didn't. We negotiated with her around other people, so we did the things to try to protect everybody. We get up to the hotel room. She's going to keep her pants on for the spanking. Sex is not going to be involved. Dan is giving her a sensual spanking. I'm up in her face because she's somebody new and I want to make sure that I'm reading body language and can hear her. Dan is spanking her and she asked me, she's going, I changed my mind. How can I get sex involved in this? And I'm like, you can't. It was negotiated out. There will be no sex during the scene or today. So, enjoy what you've got. You are getting a kick ass spanking. Now if you're done, go ahead and let me know if you're done, but we cannot add in anything. And really, I mean, we had to stick to our guns on that. So I just, I won't let anybody negotiate with me mid scene either, simply because I'm aware I won't let things be added in. It feels very manipulative to ask someone to add things in after they're under the influence of endorphins. I would tell you the story about the sneaky massage guy, but you just by saying that, you can probably figure out what I was going to say. It's the sneaky massage guy. All right, so different styles of negotiation. So we literally made up words for these that are very descriptive. Okay. So you may be going into negotiation knowing exactly what it is that you want. When I negotiate with the person at KK, I know exactly what I'm looking for. I am looking for an impact scene. I don't want anything added to it. I don't want any fluff and frills. I want to be a bottom. I want to be spanked. We may talk about the toys, but beginning, end. Not spanked, spanked. That's it. We call this river style. Okay, you've got a beginning, you've got an end. It is a stream of water. So this is the river style. And you're allowed to negotiate this. This is done all the time. You can find someone that's a bullwhip person and you're like, "Ooh, I like the bullwhip. Here, let's negotiate a bullwhip scene or a single tail scene or a caning or a wax scene or a needle scene or whatever." That is what you're negotiating. I don't want sex added in. I don't want woo added in. Here, let's talk bench, toys, aftercare if it's needed. Okay. So styles, no assumptions. The simplest one there is. I've had people come to me and go, "Can I just ask for a spanking?" I'm like, yes. Tops, mini tops love that. They don't have to guess. They don't have to, you have seen their wonderful spanking skills, and that's what you would like to try. So, river style. Then you have lake style. Now, if I had a big old whiteboard here, I'd be drawing pictures, right? So, but you have lake style. So just picture a lake with borders, all right? So this is broader than river, which has a single destination. River is, I want to be caned, use this cane. That's the scene. It's a skill scene. Lake is more, hey, can I look in your toy bag and see what you have for impact? Let's make this a little broader. Okay. So it's impact. You can do ass, you can do back of thighs, you can do back. I like thuddy, right? So let's discuss thuddy over stingy. Well, now I have to have the thing of what thuddy and stingy means, because a lot of tops haven't felt these things to know the difference. Okay. For me, thuddy is a big floppy flogger. It is a boffer bat. It is a couple of these other things. And some of them depend on how you use it too. They will start packing away the single tail whip and the dragon's tongue. And I'm like, no, 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 no. Those are not fuddy, but they're also not stingy. I like those. I call those licks of fire. I want those things. We're going to discuss the things that we're going to do. And if it hasn't been brought to the lake, it doesn't get played with. So maybe I've picked out 4 different toys and laid them out on the table. And I love to do this as well. Like I said, look through someone's toy bag. And I love a top that will go, look through my toy bag and pick the 5 things you want to play with. That is like Christmas, and it's creative. And I know that I'm going to enjoy is the wrong term. I'm going to enjoy everything that I've picked, and I don't have to worry about surprises. So I like the lake style as well. Even more, I'm not much of a river style. I'm actually more of a lake style with most people adding things in. Then you have the box style. Now, Dan loves the box style, and it's a little different than the lake style. Okay. The lake style, you've pulled a couple of things in, you're creating a scene out of that. If it's not in the lake, it's not used. Now, box style kind of has those same rules, but the reason we call it box style is because Dan will literally take a piece of paper. Ta-da! He will take a piece of paper and he will draw a box, and he will ask the person, okay, so we're going to play. This is our scene. What's in the box? What's out of the box? And it's just a graphic diagram for him. It helps him understand better what they want in a scene. So in the box, he'll go, what about kissing? And if they're like, I don't know, he's like, out of the box. That's too much thinking. So kissing's out of the box. What about spanking? Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, spanking's in the box. Well, then he'll ask a couple of questions about the spanking. He'll be like, so paddles, hands, canes, what do you consider spanking? And he'll write those here, and he'll watch. It's a longer negotiation with box style, because he wants to see how much stuff goes in the box and how much out of the box, and he can design a scene around that, right? So spanking, yes. Kissing, no. And later he can pull out, usually it's on the back of like a placemat or something at a restaurant, and he'll fold it up and put it in his pocket. And then as they get to the dungeon, he'll pull it out again later and he'll review it. He's like, so this is okay and that's okay. But he gets to know them better this way and kind of get an idea of what they're into. I mean, he will ask lots and lots of questions to try to get a feel. And then, like lake, what's in the box is allowed. What's out of the box is not. Now, he'll do sex with that as well. He won't just ask the question, is sex allowed? If they have any sort of positive reaction, if they have a negative reaction, like all out negative, boom, sex is outside of the box. If they have any sort of positive reaction, then he starts breaking that down as to what that means. And he'll ask lots of questions around that to get an idea of what it is they're looking for. All right. So also, oh, here's a note that I have. Also, when he does box style, he has found that a lot of bottoms either don't know what they want, are afraid of hurting feelings, don't want to say no because they like being submissive and saying yes. You really got to know your boundaries, and that's why he's asking so many questions, because he wants to hit on a boundary. He will literally continue to ask questions until he hits a boundary. And when the person says, "Oh no, I don't want to do that," he will praise them. Great. That's a great start. And he'll write that outside of the box, because he has to get he likes to get them to a point to where they can trust that they are allowed to speak up. And I don't know if that's an issue for anybody else, but I have seen that many times, especially with submissive bottoms, right? They get off on the kink of power exchange and they don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. All right, so we've got river style. We got lake style, which adds just a little bit more in. We've got box style, which is a lot of work, a lot of questions, but worth it at the end. And then we have the kink starter style. So Dan and I created the kink starter cards because we were so crappy at negotiating. Now, these are literally a deck of cards. And I'm taking a lot of them to our event this weekend, so that's why they were packed away. But we use these, literally, kink starter cards. They have all kinds of things on them. We use these as an icebreaker with people to try to get to know them and to be creative. What this one says, needle play, and there's all kinds of stuff in here. But it kind of gets you talking about things. And if you can use them as an icebreaker, then you really get to know the other person and what it is that they might like or not like. Now, one of the things that I like to do with these is I have my own deck, which is usually here with me in my backpack, but I put it in a suitcase because I take it with me to all my events. And if I'm going to negotiate play, I'll take out my kink starter cards, because being the introvert that I am, I like having props, right? So I will sit down with the person, and I may have already gone through these and pulled everything out that I'm not interested in. Or I may leave those in if we're just talking. If it's an icebreaker and I'm going, so what do you think about a sensual massage, right? And we talk about that, I'll leave things in here that I don't like so that I can say, ooh, food play, not my thing, or bastinado, not my thing yet, or things like that. So, but if I'm negotiating, I'll pull out everything that I'm not interested in. Then they have two options. They can either go through it and pull out everything they're not interested in and then pick randomly, because then it's a consensual deck. We've both pulled out everything we're not interested in. Or they can just pick from what I've put in there. So I really love the prop. It has come in really handy for me when someone's like, so what do you want to do? And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, for me to have to explain, I like the power exchange and everything else is just tools to get there. Some people don't understand that. So if I can pull out some cards and have props, it's much easier for me to explain what it is I'm looking for, because I can say, oh, bastinado. Well, the thing that I like about bastinado is if you hold my feet still while you strike the bottom of my feet. It's not about having my feet struck. It's about you holding my ankles down while you're doing it, right? The power exchange, the Dom sub. That's what I get off on. Or maybe you want to sit across from each other and do a yes, no, maybe pile. Flip up the card, sensual massage. Does that go in yes? It goes in yes for me. What about you? Oh, it's a no for you? Okay, it goes in the no pile. And then nothing can ever come out of the no pile. And the maybe pile is just for fun because we're going to have enough stuff in the yes pile that we can create a scene out of that, right? So make sure you have your baseline stuff going in. You've got your normal stuff that you talk about, safe words, aftercare, things like that. And then you have the Kickstarter cards to actually design the scene that you're going to do. Makes it so simple. So I love that one. We've got two more. So river, lake, box, Kickstarter. And now we go to blank canvas. Okay, so the next two are advanced, and I rarely use them myself. Okay, so blank canvas is what it sounds like, and it can be scary for the top and the bottom. Blank canvas is I turn myself over to you, do what you will. Build the big boundaries. Okay, Dan is the only one that I have no limits with, and that is because, if I'm honest, his limits match my limits. And I know he's never going to push at least my big three, which is, well, actually, I have a big four. He'll never push those because they ick him out too. So I don't have to worry about that. Hopefully, ever. We'll have to discuss it if his ideas change. But you build the big boundaries. So if I was going to play with the person in Columbus that I probably trust enough to do blank canvas with, he would still get four things that he is not allowed to do with me. It's just, and most of us have at least three of those four things or their own three things. So make sure you know yourself so that you can mention those. But I would build the big boundaries with him and then let him have fun. And it's because we've played together many times. I know what he's interested in. I know what his skill is in. He knows what I'm interested in. He wants to have fun, so he's going to play with that information that he knows. Be very careful who you do this with. This is not pick up play sort of stuff. Truly, you do not want to play with someone for the first time and as a bottom and go, oh, you can do anything, because you don't know who you've got. You've either got someone that's like, oh, great, more work for me. Now I got to figure out what they like and what to do and design this thing. And it's not a co created scene. And, this is not going to be fun. Or you could find someone on the opposite end of the spectrum of like, oh, anything, huh? Let's see what I can do here. And you're going to regret saying you can do anything, right? So you don't want either one of those responses. So for most of us, giving the top some information is going to benefit everybody. Now, with that being said, the person in Columbus that I'd played with and played with hardcore, and we had progressed through different stages of playing for us, it got to a point where he was like, one day I think I would like to do blank canvas with you. And I was like, oh. And for him to say that meant that he was really trusting himself as a top to be able to do that and know that he wouldn't hurt me, damage me, harm me, that we'd have fun with it. So that was kind of scary because it's like, oh, I that means I won't be setting boundaries with you except these four things that I won't do. And then you get to play with anything else. Well, that could be interesting. And then COVID hit, and I never got a chance to follow through with it and find out what it was going to be like. So blank canvas is not something that I would do, but it is absolutely a possibility and definitely in some people's risk profiles. So know your risk profile. All right. still with blank canvas though. It's less constrictive than a box. The focus. So with the box, you're trying to find out what's inside the box that you can play with. With blank canvas, everything's in the box. So the top will keep in mind like my four things that's outside of the box. Does that make sense? So the concentration on box is what's in the box that they can play with. Concentration on blank canvas is those four things of mine that are outside of the box. Their focus is on that. Make sure they don't touch those four things. Everything else is open. So a different sort of focus for these two. Blank canvas allows for more intuition and surprise. And sometimes surprise can be really fun. So Dan gets blank canvas with me. He doesn't always want it. Sometimes he just wants River. Hey, what do you want tonight? I want a spanking. Great, here we go. Sometimes it's Box or Lake. Hey, I'd like a spanking, but let's throw in these toys. And if you feel like using them, go for it. But blank canvas is fun too. That's how I've ended up with some amazing scenes like the witch hunt. Yeah, that was so cool. The last style, and we're going to wrap up and have questions in just a minute. I won't have a lot to say about this one unless we were at Beltane or something like that, a sacred sexuality event. So there is another style of negotiation that is totally, totally different, and you won't usually find it in a BDSM scene, and that's called rider ridden. And that is more in the magic scene, more in the ritual BDSM scene, more in the ordeal ritual sort of scenes, things like that. So they're more spiritual, magical, led by the universe, is the terminology I'm going to use right now. So therefore, the negotiation for that is a little bit different. I've actually, this is probably the only time I top is if I'm either co-topping with Dan, which is still bottoming because I'm submissive to him. Very confusing. But with rider ridden, I am a priestess top. So the negotiation, like I said, is a little bit different. I only do this with people that have total trust in me and allow me to use my intuition. So, and allow me to be a vessel and a channel for the messages that they're supposed to be given. That is very hard to explain. If it's your if it's your deal, you'll know what I mean. If it's not, it's just going to be confusing. Usually with this sort of negotiation, I go for intent. What is the intent of what we're doing? And then what is absolutely out of bounds, and don't give me a lot, right? It can only be like the three or four things. And then trust that I'm not going to harm you and I'm going to use my intuition. And those are amazingly powerful. And like I said, the only thing that I really top for, and I'm good at it. So I'm really good. And I'm also really good at not wanting a target on my back and not wanting to get a consent violation. So I know the questions to ask and I know, how to do the thing, but it is not pickup play. And when I do these sort of scenes, they take weeks, if not months, of talking and negotiation. So a lot of prep goes into those. So there shouldn't be any surprises. There could still be unknown landmines, but there won't be too many surprises is the wrong word because things could happen during it that we didn't specifically discuss, but we know so much and have talked so much by then that it's really not a surprise with what happens. Also, my ritual toy bag is very different than a regular toy bag, so I have to discuss all of that with them as well because it's got the woo stuff. It's got oils and colors and strings and just those things. So I have to go through even more stuff and describe to them and find out allergies and find out, things like that. So that one is rider and ridden. So we have river, lake, box, the Kickstarter cards, blank canvas. I will get that scene one day. I so want to see what he's got up his sleeve. And then rider and ridden. Now, there are all other kinds and types of play that may have different styles of negotiation. If you are into rope, that is a little bit different, but keep in mind all the stuff that I shared with you because some of that's going to come into play. If you are into primal, that's a whole other kettle of fish as well. But again, know your basics, know your personal baseline, know what consent means to you, know what aftercare you might need, things like that. Anyway, those are the 6 styles. So again, you can find everything I do on eroticawakening.com. Dan and I have a lot of places that we're going to be teaching in person over the next year, so you can find out where we're going to be and things like that.